Students nowadays are proving their intelligence in entirely different ways than how they used to. Sure, they might not be able to recite the names of all the USA's presidents in order, but they definitely know how to cheat on a test. Today we're showing you the best and most unique ways that students today are cheating on their exams. Getting the answers to tests can be difficult, whereas getting the answers on the hub is pretty straightforward and a whole lot more interesting. Before we start, make sure to click subscribe. Calculators aren't just used for math. Have you noticed that kids nowadays seem to keep their calculators far closer than they did years ago? Have you ever wondered why? Well, it turns out that calculators aren't just good for math, but for a whole range of subjects now too. You might be wondering how exactly a calculator can be used to help in other subjects, because surely you're not going to be able to remember your history notes simply from staring at different numbers on the screen, right? Well, kids nowadays are one step ahead of the rest of us, and are using a whole load of different things in order to use their calculators to cheat. First of all, using a pencil on the back of a calculator means it's almost invisible until you hold it right up close to your eye. This means that scribbling a few key facts on the back could easily help you get that A. Although we have to admit, you might need a slightly more intricate reason as to why you're taking your calculator into a social sciences exam. However, if you're studying for a math degree and can't remember some important figures, then you've got an excuse all set up and ready. We bet you'll never look at your calculator the same way again after hearing this. Writing on fingernails. But if you definitely can't bring a calculator into your exam with you, then there's something else you can write on. And it might just be the argument you need to stop biting your nails. That's right, kids nowadays are writing their notes on their fingernails. If you're scratching your head as to how this is possible, then you're not alone. Don't worry, because we're equally puzzled. But similar to using pencils on a calculator, you can also use pencil or some pens to write on your fingers. This might seem like a good idea, but we're very conscious of all the ways this could go wrong. For starters, what happens if you decide to use nail varnish instead of pencil and your teachers catch your new distinctive nail art? Or if you use your pencil and rely too heavily on these makeshift notes, only to find that they rub off when you're walking into the exam hall. It might be a good way to cover individual topics too, but we're not sure just how much information you could actually fit onto your nails. Maybe if you use your toenails too, then you'd be able to get yourself a high score, but that just opens up a whole other range of problems. Invisible ink. If some of our previous examples haven't surprised you, then this one just might. For the extra sneaky kids, or maybe just those desperate for top grades, writing in pencil just isn't enough. Sure, they'll scribble their way through the entire exam in pen or pencil, but sometimes the thought of getting caught cheating is enough to stop you from scribbling secret hints in the same ink. The only way out of this is to write in invisible ink. We know what you're thinking here. Surely invisible ink would be pointless because you wouldn't be able to see it. Well, kids nowadays know all the best hints and tips and use ultraviolet ink, which only shows up under a special light. Write it down on plain paper and you won't be able to see a thing, but shine a light on top of it and suddenly your A grade is staring you in the face. However, we're very conscious of the fact that shining a light onto a suspicious empty piece of paper might look a bit strange in an exam hall. So we're not sure how effective this trick would actually be. Maybe they're convincing the nearby teachers that it's some posh form of eraser, or maybe they're just being especially sneaky, but it seems to be working somehow. Water bottle labels. It's a good day to stay hydrated during exam season, and if there's one thing we know we're definitely entitled to, it's a bottle of water. We wouldn't want students dropping down from thirst in the middle of an exam, although we still remember the rumor that we'd all get top grades if that did happen to somebody. But we wouldn't wish that on our friends, and it seems that today's students wouldn't either, so they're aiming for the next best thing: writing on water bottle labels. This one isn't as straightforward as you would imagine, because obviously, water bottles get checked before you go through to take an exam. It would be entirely stupid to think you could write a couple of equations down this way and successfully get it inside with you. So obviously, students are using their chemical knowledge to their advantage. What we mean by this is that students are melting off the label of the water bottle in order to scribble notes on the inside and then fill it back up and stick the label back down. Even the toughest of teachers isn't going to individually peel off each water bottle label, making this a pretty secure method for getting your notes in. As a bonus, some students are doing this with 2 bottles, which means double the hydration and also double the tips. Using clothes. Now we're going back to basics. We're using one thing that we know all students will have with them during their exams, because you probably won't be allowed onto school premises without them. Yes, we're talking about clothes. We admit using clothes to cover up exam tips is probably a relatively new idea, and we've noticed different ways of doing it depending on whether you're male or female. The most common method for boys seems to be wearing shorts and writing the clues just above where the shorts end. Then, during the exam, if you're stuck for an answer, simply roll up the shorts a tiny bit and there's your solution. For girls, it's a slightly trickier hack. Many girls seem to be wearing semi-sheer tights that, you guessed it, are sheer enough to read notes through, but only just. The trick is to write very softly, so your new temporary tattoos are only visible to your eye. If anyone asks, you've got some new ink to celebrate your exam season. No one would ever have to know. The best part about this hack is that it's very unlikely to be found, because as thorough as some teachers are, they're not going to bother looking specifically at your clothes. Using external memory. You might think that using someone else's memory is something from the future, because surely there's no way to do it at the moment, right? Well, it depends if you're talking about a human memory or a robot memory. Or more specifically, a calculator's memory. That's right, some of the more advanced calculators on the market allow you to type in your information and come back to it later. The best part is, half of these smart calculators don't even look like they're anything too impressive. Obviously, this is great if you're planning on using it to ace a test, but not so good if you spent a lot of money on a posh calculator purely for show. But that's your own problem. These smart calculators are becoming more frequently used because teachers just can't seem to keep up with the technology. As soon as they figured out what one make looks like, a brand new, even smarter calculator comes out. And we're back to square one. Because this tip relies so heavily on a calculator, it can't really help you with other subjects, which means if you're struggling to learn Shakespeare quotes, you might have to keep looking for another solution. Getting your paper returned. Now this trick makes us really think that students deserve the grades they're eventually getting. Sure, maybe they're not great at math, but this tip in particular suggests that there's more than meets the eye when it comes to some young people. A hack that's becoming very popular in some schools is for students to ask for their paper back to look at where they went wrong. The teacher usually allows them to do this because everyone wants to learn from their mistakes. What they don't know is that the students are then altering their paper or adding in some extra marks to make it look like the teacher missed a step when marking it. Then they can angrily give the paper back to the teacher and point out the huge page of markings that they supposedly forgot to read. The teacher will become embarrassed at their own mistake, and the student will get their paper remarked, and more often than not, will achieve the extra marks as well. Unlike some of the more innocent suggestions on the list, we think this one's more psychologically taunting, and we like a lot of our teachers, so we're not sure we'd want to try and fool them like this. Erasing your answers. If anything on this list sounds like a counterproductive tip, then it's erasing your answers. But hear us out here. Instead of using their skin or fingernails or their calculators, some students are using an almost foolproof method of sneaking those answers in. They're writing their answers on their erasers and then, well, erasing them. It's perfect. It means if any suspecting teacher happens to be walking your way, the student can simply use their eraser on their blank page and all of the answers will be gone. However, like the rest of these methods, this one does come with a few issues, namely the fact that most erasers are pretty small. So really, how can you actually benefit from it? We've also got the question of how many erasers can one person reasonably take with them into an exam. We guess if your friends are in the same exam, then you can swap erasers. But if you're not allowed to speak, which is common in most exams, this one might backfire very quickly. Also, if you're worrying that your teacher is walking over and it's a false alarm, you could end up accidentally scribbling out all of your notes without even needing to. Not that we condone cheating in the first place, but this hack especially doesn't seem like it could be the best one to use. The screw top pen. Students seem to be using this technique a lot nowadays, which has most definitely been helped with the rise in modern technology. The best part is that it's so simple to use, all you need is a special pen and some notepaper. The type of pen you need is the only big hurdle you'll have to overcome. Oh, and not getting caught, of course. But that's something that any student referring to this list has already realized. The pen that many students seem to be buying now has a screw top, which lets you put something inside without anyone else knowing. You're probably getting an idea of what this hack entails. Students are writing tiny notes on pieces of paper and sliding them inside the pen. Then if the teacher leaves the room during the test, they can simply slide the sheets of paper out of the pen and read the answers. The only way this can backfire is if the teacher doesn't leave the room, which means you're more likely to have to somehow unscrew it while they're wandering around. It also means you have to hide the paper once you're done with it. Or, of course, just learn the answers and don't cheat, but that's just an idea. Tissues. Is there anything worse than waking up on the day of an exam with a cold? Nobody likes being ill at the best of times, but it's even worse when we actually have to carry on with our day, ill or not. But some students have managed to make the best out of a bad situation, and are using illnesses to their advantage. We're not talking about breaking a limb, although you might get the sympathy vote if that does happen, but instead we're talking about getting a bad cold. So bad that you need to take a pack of tissues into the exam hall with you. Tissues in hand, with some very clever students showing a lot of initiative, managed to write their notes on their used tissue. Because if there's one thing that teachers aren't likely to check, it's your damp tissues. We didn't say this was a good idea, and we didn't encourage you to use it either, but if you're desperate, then not washing your hands for a few days after using public transit should probably be the catalyst you're waiting for. Just remember, once your test is out of the way and you're struggling to get through your illness for a week afterwards, you only have yourself to blame. We like to think you don't need to rely on cheating methods to pass tests, and you're just watching this video for entertainment purposes, right? With that in mind, it's probably time to get back to studying, but we hope you like this video, and we'll see you next time. Thanks!